We really believe that we are entering a new era as a church. If you've been around kind of in recent months, you'll have heard us talk in that kind of language quite a number of times, really. And we're really sensing that God is doing a massive work of renewal in the church. And as we start to kind of ease out of lockdown and start to think about the future, we're wanting to kind of really relook over our foundations as a church and how we want to rebuild. And so just wanting to start to put a bit of flesh on the bones around some of that, really. And so just want to take some moments now just to explain and express a bit of our heart for small group life and community life in the context of Gateway. Because how we think about community life, how we think about small groups is actually really important for us as we think about the new era. Because the reality is growing as disciples, expressing what it means to be family and fueling one another into the mission of God happens most effectively in smaller networks and smaller contexts. I read this quote the other day that was just brilliant. The church, in its most potent form, is small. And for a long time, if you've been around in Gateway, you'll know that our kind of model of community life has been centered around small groups, or more latterly, we've called them household groups. And primarily, these have kind of operated as places of connection, community, and care, if you like. Now, of course, they're more than that. Of course, they're places of opening the word, of praying together, of praying for one another, of encouraging one another in life and faith and growing in God together. But with this huge work of renewal that we believe God is doing in the church, as we enter into this new era that we've been speaking about over many months, we feel it's right that we long for so much more as a community as we gather in smaller context and smaller groups. We gather as community to grow as disciples on mission. And our life together as a community should therefore be much more centered around disciple making and missional engagement than it ever has been before. You see, the purpose of Christian community is to grow as disciples and to catapult one another into the mission field of God everywhere, every day, in whatever context we find ourselves in. We do that individually as we grow as disciples, but the way that we shape our life together as a community needs to also be kind of reflective of this and build towards this as well. And so we're really wanting to kind of launch on and embark on a shift in culture about what we think about small groups in the life of Gateway. And one of the ways we just want to do that really is shifting some of our language as well, which kind of just helps us imagine some of the future. So we want to shift away from language like small groups or household groups, much more towards what we want to call missional communities. Now, this is far more than just changing a name. This is really about a shift in emphasis, a shift in culture, so that the very essence of our life together as a community is about making disciples and being on mission together. Where we see mission and discipleship and community working together, that is where I believe we see the church of Jesus Christ in its purest form. And so we want to say, as we embark on this shift towards missional communities, that actually discipleship and mission become much more central, and our life together is much more centered around that than they ever have been before. And that's not to devalue connection or care or community, but study after study has actually shown that we care for one another much better as we go on mission together, because we need one another more deeply. And so as we think about missional communities going forward, I guess we see kind of two types of missional communities emerging. The first is where there's a common mission that's kind of the driving force for that community. So a neighborhood or a community or a specific demographic or a workplace where there's a group of people who say, we want to live life in community, grow as disciples, and reach this specific place together on mission. The second type is where maybe it's much more, the leading edge of it is much more around discipleship. So there's a group of people who get together to say, our goal is to grow as disciples of Jesus together and to fuel one another into the mission field in our everyday, in our workplace, in our community, in our neighborhoods, wherever that might be. It might be lots of different spaces. But the reality is, wherever and whatever type of missional community emerges, whether it's kind of more mission-led or more discipleship-led, What we long is that the very essence and the very purpose of our life together is centered around those two things, discipleship and mission. And we're really at the start of this, kind of as we get going on this. This is the start of a culture shift, and culture shift doesn't just happen by clicking your fingers. It takes months and years of working towards something, of learning on the way, of adapting, of going after something together. And so we're wanting to embark on this together so that we very much get embedded into us rhythms of discipleship, community, and mission. So over the coming weeks and months, we just want to take some time to, I guess, explain what do we actually mean by missional communities? How are they going to be different to groups as we've known them before? How might you get involved? What is it that God's put in your heart? How do we start to release and empower that? We've already started talking to leaders and kind of what they're living with and things like that. But I guess the reality is the call in this moment is for each one of us to respond, to start asking questions like, where's God placed me? What is it that God's put in my heart? Where are the people that God has called me to invest in and see grow as disciples of Jesus Christ? Because that is actually the place where missional communities are birthed. They're birthed from within each one of us as we get before God, pray and say, God, where is it that you're calling me to invest into? So we want to embark on this shift together. Like I said, we'll learn rhythms and we'll adapt on the way. I'm sure there'll be some bumps as we figure out a new way of working. It's not going to be something that we just launch overnight. There's a journey to go on together. But for me, as I think about the future and as I think about a people where the very essence of our community is centered around discipleship and mission, it makes me think that's a journey worth embarking on. That's a journey that really aligns itself to the great commission of Jesus Christ to go and make disciples of all nations, for us to go and live out as faithful followers of Jesus everywhere, every day, as scattered servants, empowered by his Spirit, living life together as community. That for me is worth embarking on. That for me is worth redefining and reshaping how we think about our life together as a community. So we're going to be talking about it more over the months ahead, but really this is just the launch pad, I guess, of getting us really believing and praying and seeking God for a new way of thinking about how we operate together.